Shalom Uvracha. Megillas Esther is the story of the Jewish people in exile. We don't have our own sovereignty. We don't have the Beis HaMikdash. We don't have prophecy. We're lacking all the things that we have under HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Eretz Yisrael with the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, it tells a very specific story of how the Jews live in exile. The bottom line of the story is that even in the times of darkness, the times of concealment, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks after us. Hashem guides us even in these times, and we survive to tell the story. That's the bottom line. But within the story, there's also a lot of insights, a lot of points to note of how the Jews live in exile. I'd like to dwell on one of them, and that is the problem, the existential problem of Jews in exile, which is a problem that Haman brings up. The wicked Haman says Lashon Hara. The Gemara says he knew the best Lashon Hara against the Jews. What does he say? That there's a nation that doesn't follow the Datot HaMelech. The nation doesn't follow the ways, the instructions, the laws of the king, and therefore it's not worth maintaining this nation. It's best to do away with the nation, and you'll also make some financial gain. Why is it that the Jews are unfaithful to the nation? Is that true? Surely we keep Dinah de Malchuta, we keep the laws of the nation. Well, there's something deeper there. The deeper thing is that the Jews will always be a separate identity. It's not just a religion, it's a nation. And our first responsibility, our first loyalty is to the Jewish people, to the Jewish nation, and not to the empire, the Persian Empire, or whichever nation we happen to be dwelling within. And the Jew becomes the ultimate other. It's true that there are other nations also within the Persian Empire, but if we make a collage, a mosaic from all of those nations together, 127 nations, the Jewish people will still stick out like a sore thumb. They won't be able to blend harmoniously into the other nations. They have ways that are by definition other. They don't fit in. And that's what Haman was telling Achashverosh the king. There's no way that they're going to fit in. There's no way that they'll be loyal. Even in Mitzrayim, this is how it began. Mitzrayim, Paro says that there's a nation within us that's going to be a fifth column. That they'll fight against us together with our enemies. And then they'll make their way to the land of Israel, land of Canaan, which is presumably also part of the Egyptian empire at the time. Either way, they're not loyal. And throughout history, this has been the anti-Semitic slur against the Jews. They're not loyal. In France, we'll give rights to Jews, but only to Jews as Frenchmen, not to Jews as Jews. If they're Jews as a part of the Jewish nation, then they don't deserve any rights. And the problem of dual loyalty continues to plague us. Wherever we go in the world, the anti-Semites will always say there's dual loyalty. There isn't absolute loyalty. And in a certain sense, there cannot be absolute loyalty because the Jews are their own nation. And the problem of being in exile is an existential and eternal problem. The solution to the problem is the solution that Herzl came up with after appreciating the depth of the issue of the problem, and that is to set up our own sovereign state, to have a state which is both a state of the Jews and a Jewish state representing the Jewish people. And then you can have one loyalty, you can have one identity. Your loyalty is to the Jewish people and to the political representative of the Jews. And then you don't have any more dual loyalty problems. And that's great. There was one group among the Jews who said we're not buying in, and that's the Haredi group. The Haredi group said, we're living in Israel, but we're still living a Megillat Esther story. Just like Mordechai is a court Jew in the Persian court, so we're going to have our court Jews in the Knesset, even as a part of the government, but it's not us. Israel doesn't represent us, our fidelity, our loyalty to the Jewish people, not to a Jewish state that doesn't represent us because it's a secular state, because it wasn't established based on the values that we would like inculcated into our society. And therefore, it's not our state, and we're still living in Megillat Esther. We're still living a life of Galus, a different type of Galus under Jews, but still a life of Galus. The trouble is that over time, this argument of living a life within Galus became weaker. Became, I would say today, untenable. If you're 30% of government, an inherent part of Israel's right can that really be considered living in Galus? If you have members in the security cabinet where the most existential decisions about Israel are made, you have members there. Can that be called Galus? When you are participating in Israel's workforce and economy and culture in such a deep level, unprecedented and continually growing, can that really be called not me, not us? Is that tenable anymore? Can you isolate from yourself effectively? And these questions, these searching and profound questions have sparked, I would say, two conflicting motions within the Haredi space. One motion is a motion of counterculture. It's a motion of resistance. We're all going to become the Pelega Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem faction. We're going to become anti-Zionist. We're going to call the army an army of heresy, of Shmad, where it's forbidden to serve, come what may. We're going to be objectionist. We're going to fight against the Jewish state, and preferably while still receiving its budgets and so on, its financial assistance, but perhaps even at that expense. We're going to fight. That's one approach. And that approach has become, I would say, more popular over the last few years within the Haredi space. It's not all the way Neturei Karta, but it's definitely there. That's the Jerusalem faction, the Peleg Yerushalmi approach. The other approach, though, is to think about the reality as a reality that's going to define the contours of Haredi life for the coming years. And how do we address it? And the answer is to prepare ourselves for a translation of our core values, the values that we've preserved over all these decades in times of greater isolation, and thinking, how do you translate them into a way that can actually impact, that can be a part of Israel in a deeper sense? How do we elevate Israel? How do we bring more Kedusha, more holiness into Israel? We're going to be there anyway. It's happening. That transition is taking place. We're abandoning the life of Megillat Esther, of Purim, and we're embracing a life of sovereignty in which we have one passport. Yated Neman still speaks about two passports, the Jewish passport and the Israeli one. They're blending together. And it's up to us to think about, in times of those blending, how do we preserve those values that are so dear to us, that are so pure, and that we must preserve because that's what we're all about, while at the same time bringing them outside of our own quarters, of our boundaries, and ensuring that our integration, participation within Israel is one in which we're giving, in one in which we're able to share the goodness that we have, rather than one that undermines who we are. We should all have a wonderful Purim festival, time of joy, a time of redemption, a time of salvation.